On a quiet Saturday afternoon, Keanu Reeves decided to take a break from his hectic Hollywood schedule. He loved motorcycles more than anything else in the world. They were his escape, his passion, and his way of connecting with something raw and real. That day, he slipped into his favorite pair of faded jeans, pulled on a simple black leather jacket, and laced up his sturdy boots. There was no entourage following him, no flashy sports car parked outside, and certainly no indication that this casually dressed man was one of the most famous actors in the world. Keanu stepped into a local motorcycle dealership located in the heart of Los Angeles. The showroom was bustling with activity, customers browsing through rows of gleaming bikes, salespeople chatting animatedly, and mechanics tinkering with engines nearby. It was exactly the kind of place Keanu enjoyed, vibrant, full of energy, and brimming with people who shared his love for two wheels. As he walked inside, he felt a sense of calm wash over him. This wasn't about glamour or fame. It was about finding the perfect ride. The first thing Keanu noticed was how diverse the selection was. From sleek cruisers to rugged dirt bikes, there was something for everyone. His eyes lit up as he wandered past each display, running his fingers lightly over polished chrome handlebars and shiny exhaust pipes. Every bike had its own personality, its own story waiting to be told. For Keanu, these weren't just machines. They were works of art, built with precision and care. He could spend hours here, lost in thought, imagining himself tearing down open highways or navigating winding mountain roads. As he moved deeper into the showroom, a young couple caught his attention. They were admiring a bright red sport bike, their faces glowing with excitement. Keanu couldn't help but smile at their enthusiasm. It reminded him of his own early days when he first fell in love with motorcycles. Back then, he didn't have much money, but he saved every penny he could to buy his very first bike. Those memories still brought him immense joy, and seeing others experience that same thrill made him feel connected to them in a profound way. Eventually, Keanu stopped near a stunning custom-built chopper. Its design was bold yet elegant, with intricate details that showcased the craftsmanship behind it. He stood there for a moment, taking it all in, the curved lines of the frame, the hand-painted flames along the tank, and the perfectly balanced proportions. It was breathtaking. But what intrigued him most were the possibilities. What if he added a different seat, or swapped out the handlebars for something more ergonomic? The idea of customization fascinated him, and he wanted to know everything about it. That's when Mark, one of the salesmen, approached him. Mark was a tall, broad-shouldered man in his mid-40s with a confident stride and a clipboard tucked under his arm. At first glance, he seemed friendly enough, offering a quick nod and a half-smile as he greeted Keanu. "Looking for something specific today?" he asked, his tone casual but slightly dismissive. Keanu turned to face him, his expression warm and polite. "Not really," he replied, "just checking things out. This chopper here looks amazing. I was wondering if you guys do custom modifications." Mark glanced at the bike briefly before shrugging. "Yeah, we can do some stuff," he said vaguely. "Depends on what you're looking for." Keanu nodded, unfazed by Mark's lack of detail. "Cool. I've been thinking about adding some performance upgrades, maybe tweak the engine a bit. Do you guys work with aftermarket parts?" Mark frowned, clearly unprepared for such technical questions. Yeah, sure," he muttered, scratching the back of his neck. "We've got some options. Not too many people go for that kind of thing, though." Keanu tilted his head, his curiosity piqued. "Really? I think performance would be a big draw for riders, especially around here where the roads are so scenic." "Well, not everyone knows as much as you do," Mark said, his voice tinged with sarcasm. He crossed his arms and leaned back slightly, giving Keanu a once-over. "Are you even planning to buy anything today? Because I've got other customers who might actually make a purchase." For a brief second, Keanu hesitated. He wasn't used to being spoken to like this, but he chose not to react. Instead, he smiled softly and nodded again. "I'm just exploring my options," he said calmly. "But thanks for your time." Mark rolled his eyes and muttered something under his breath before walking away. leaving Keanu standing alone beside the chopper. If anyone else had been in his position, they might have felt insulted or angry, but Keanu simply sighed and shook his head. He understood that not everyone had a good day, and maybe Mark was just having a tough one. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off about the interaction. Determined not to let it ruin his visit, Keanu continued exploring the showroom. He struck up conversations with other employees, asking thoughtful questions and sharing insights about motorcycle culture. One mechanic in particular was thrilled to chat with him about engine tuning and suspension setups. Their discussion reignited Keanu's excitement, reminding him why he loved this world so much. But despite the pleasant exchanges, Keanu couldn't ignore the nagging sensation that lingered in the back of his mind. Something about Mark's attitude bothered him, not because it was rude, but because it reflected a deeper issue. In a place where passion and creativity should thrive, there was an air of indifference, almost as if people like Keanu didn't belong. And while he tried to brush it off, he knew this wouldn't be the last time he encountered such attitudes. Little did Keanu realize, however, that this seemingly ordinary visit to the motorcycle dealership would soon spiral into an unforgettable chapter of his life. One that would test his patience, challenge his principles, and ultimately reveal the true strength of his character. As Keanu continued his exploration of the motorcycle dealership, he found himself drawn to another section of the showroom. This area was dedicated to vintage bikes, models from decades past that carried a certain charm and nostalgia. There, weathered frames and faded paint jobs told stories of long journeys and countless adventures. Keanu ran his fingers over the seat of a 1970s Harley-Davidson, imagining what it must have been like to ride one during its heyday. The thought filled him with a sense of wonder, and he couldn't help but strike up a conversation with another employee nearby. This time the interaction was pleasant. The employee, a younger man named Jake, shared Keanu's enthusiasm for classic bikes. They talked about everything from restoration techniques to the cultural impact these machines had on generations of riders. For a while, Keanu forgot all about Mark and the earlier unpleasant exchange. He was completely absorbed in the moment, lost in a world where motorcycles were more than just vehicles. They were symbols of freedom and self-expression. But just as Keanu was about to ask Jake about sourcing parts for restorations, Mark reappeared. It seemed he hadn't forgotten their earlier conversation either. His presence loomed large and his expression was anything but friendly. "Still hanging around, huh?" Mark said, his tone dripping with irritation. "I thought you'd be gone by now." Keanu turned to face him, keeping his demeanor calm and composed. "Just looking," he replied evenly. "There's a lot to see here." Mark snorted, clearly unimpressed. "Yeah, well, this isn't a museum. If you're not buying, maybe you should let other people have a chance to look around." The comment stung, but Keanu didn't rise to the bait. Instead, he nodded politely and took a step back. "You're right," he said. "I don't want to get in anyone's way." For a moment, it seemed like the situation might diffuse. But then Jake chimed in, trying to smooth things over. "Hey, no worries, man," he said to Mark. "He's cool, just really into bikes." Mark shot Jake a sharp look, silencing him instantly. Then he turned back to Keanu, his patience visibly wearing thin. "Look," he snapped, "if you're gonna act like you know so much, why don't you tell me exactly what kind of bike you're looking for, or are you just wasting my time?" Keanu hesitated. He could feel the tension rising, and he knew this wasn't going to end well. Still, he tried to keep things civil. "I'm not sure yet," he admitted. "I'm still figuring it out. But I do appreciate learning more about the options." "Learning?" Mark repeated, his voice laced with mockery. "What are you, some kind of expert now? You think you can walk in here and school us on bikes?" Keanu frowned slightly, sensing the hostility escalating. "I didn't say that," he replied. "I'm just asking questions." "Well, maybe you should save your questions for someone who cares," Mark shot back. "People come here to buy bikes, not waste hours talking about stuff they'll never afford." At that moment, something shifted in Keanu's expression. Up until now, he had remained patient and understanding, giving Mark the benefit of the doubt. But this latest jab hit a nerve. Not because of the implication that he couldn't afford a bike. He knew better than anyone that money wasn't an issue, but because of the dismissive attitude behind it. Mark wasn't just being rude. He was belittling Keanu's genuine interest in motorcycles, treating it as if it were meaningless. Before Keanu could respond, Mark made a mistake that would change everything. In a fit of frustration, he raised his hand and delivered a sharp slap across Keanu's face. The sound echoed through the showroom, drawing immediate attention from everyone nearby. Gasps rippled through the crowd as people stopped what they were doing to witness the shocking scene unfold. For a split second, Keanu stood frozen, his hand instinctively reaching up to touch his cheek. Pain flickered across his features, but it wasn't physical. It was emotional. He couldn't believe what had just happened. Here he was minding his own business, simply indulging in a passion he loved, and now he was being humiliated in front of strangers. Mark, realizing the gravity of his actions too late, stepped back, his face pale. "Get out," he growled, pointing toward the exit. "I don't want to see you here again." Keanu didn't argue. He didn't shout or retaliate. Instead, he straightened his posture, squared his shoulders, and walked calmly toward the door. As he passed by the rows of motorcycles, he paused briefly to glance at the chopper that had caught his eye earlier. There was a sadness in his eyes, not because of the altercation, but because the joy he had felt moments ago was now tainted. Outside, the Los Angeles sun beat down on him as he stepped onto the sidewalk. For a few minutes, he stood there, collecting his thoughts. Normally, Keanu wasn't one to dwell on negativity. He prided himself on staying grounded and focusing on the positives in life. But this incident was different. It wasn't just about being slapped. It was about how quickly assumptions and arrogance could lead to cruelty. As he walked away, Keanu replayed the events in his mind. He wondered if Mark even realized who he was dealing with. Did it matter? Would knowing Keanu's identity have changed anything? These questions swirled in his head, leaving him unsettled. What troubled him most, though, was the realization that this wasn't just about him. People judged others based on appearances every single day, often without thinking twice about it. And sometimes those judgments led to hurtful consequences. Despite the turmoil brewing inside him, Keanu refused to let bitterness take hold. Instead, he decided to focus on what he could control: his response. He knew that holding on to anger wouldn't solve anything. It would only weigh him down. So as he climbed into his car and drove away from the dealership, he resolved to approach the situation with grace and wisdom. After all, he believed in the power of redemption. Everyone deserved a chance to make things right, even someone like Mark. Little did Keanu know, however, that this incident would soon become public knowledge. Within hours, word of the altercation spread like wildfire, igniting debates and discussions across social media platforms. Fans rallied behind their beloved actor, demanding justice for the disrespect he had endured. Meanwhile, the dealership scrambled to contain the fallout, issuing apologies and distancing themselves from Mark's behavior. But amidst the chaos, one question lingered in everyone's minds. How would Keanu choose to handle this situation? Would he seek revenge, or would he rise above it all with the same humility and kindness that defined him? Only time would tell. By the time Keanu Reeves drove away from the motorcycle dealership, the sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the streets of Los Angeles. He didn't turn on the radio or make a phone call. Instead, he sat in silence, letting the hum of his car engine fill the quiet space around him. His cheek still stung faintly, but it wasn't the physical pain that occupied his thoughts. It was the weight of what had just happened. The slap itself felt almost secondary compared to the emotions swirling inside him: confusion, disappointment, and even a touch of sadness. What struck Keanu most was how quickly the interaction had spiraled out of control. One moment he'd been peacefully admiring vintage bikes and sharing stories with Jake. The next, he was standing outside, dismissed like an inconvenience. It made him reflect on human behavior, particularly the tendency to judge others based on superficial impressions. Mark hadn't known who Keanu was, nor did he seem interested in finding out. All he saw was a casually dressed man asking questions, and for some reason that had been enough to provoke hostility. Keanu couldn't shake the feeling that this kind of prejudice wasn't unique to Mark. It happened everywhere, every day. People were quick to label one another, often without taking the time to understand their perspectives. And while Keanu understood that everyone had bad days, he couldn't help but wonder if Mark's actions stemmed from something deeper. Perhaps insecurity, frustration, or even fear. Whatever the root cause, it highlighted a fundamental truth about humanity: that kindness and empathy weren't always instinctive. They required effort, patience, and a willingness to see beyond appearances. Meanwhile, back at the dealership, chaos erupted as word of the incident spread among the staff. A junior employee named Lisa, who had overheard fragments of the confrontation, decided to review the security footage out of curiosity. When she saw the familiar face on the screen, those piercing eyes, that unmistakable smile, her jaw dropped. "Wait, is that Keanu Reeves?" she whispered to herself, her voice trembling with disbelief. She immediately called over her co-worker Jake, who confirmed her suspicions. Sure enough, the man Mark had slapped was none other than Hollywood's beloved action star. Panic rippled through the dealership like wildfire. Employees huddled together, whispering anxiously about what this meant for the business. Some argued that Mark's behavior was inexcusable, while others tried to defend him, claiming he'd simply been having a rough day. But no matter which side they took, one thing was clear: this was going to blow up. Within minutes, someone leaked details of the altercation online, sparking a frenzy across social media platforms. Fans flocked to Twitter, Instagram, and Reddit, posting memes, videos, and angry comments condemning Mark's actions. Hashtags like "Shice Justice for Keanu" and "Respect the Reeves" trended globally, turning the incident into a viral sensation overnight. The backlash was swift and intense. Commentators speculated endlessly about why Mark had reacted so aggressively, with many pointing fingers at toxic workplace environments and unchecked egos. Others praised Keanu for handling the situation with dignity, noting how he chose to walk away rather than escalate the conflict. Memes comparing Keanu to John Wick flooded the internet, with captions like "Don't slap the wrong guy" and even "Keanu deserves respect." For a brief period, the entire world seemed obsessed with dissecting the drama. Amidst the uproar, the owner of the dealership, a middle-aged man named Greg, scrambled to mitigate the damage. He issued a public apology via the company's official website, expressing regret for the unacceptable treatment Keanu had endured. In the statement, Greg emphasized that such behavior went against the values of the dealership and promised to take immediate action. True to his word, he fired Mark later that evening, informing him that his conduct was grounds for termination. While Mark protested, claiming he hadn't known who Keanu was, Greg remained firm. The reputation of the dealership, and possibly its survival, depended on making amends. But despite the apology and disciplinary measures, the story refused to die down. Journalists began digging deeper, uncovering past complaints filed by customers against Mark and questioning whether the dealership fostered a culture of disrespect. Investigative pieces popped up in major publications, scrutinizing everything from employee training programs to customer service policies. The pressure mounted, forcing Greg to consider drastic changes to salvage the business. Throughout all of this, Keanu remained silent. Unlike many celebrities who might have seized the opportunity to vent their frustrations or demand compensation, Keanu chose to step back and observe. He avoided interviews, declined requests for statements, and refrained from engaging with the online discourse. To those who knew him well, this came as no surprise. Keanu had always valued privacy and preferred to let his actions speak louder than words. Still, his silence only fueled more speculation. Was he planning legal action? Would he address the incident publicly? Or was he simply moving on, choosing not to dwell on negativity? Days passed, and the fervor showed no signs of slowing. Meanwhile, Keanu returned to his usual routine, focusing on projects close to his heart. He spent time volunteering at a local youth center, mentoring kids and encouraging them to pursue their passions. During one session, a teenager asked him about the rumors surrounding the slap. The room fell silent as everyone waited for his response. Keanu chuckled softly, brushing off the question with characteristic humility. "Sometimes life throws unexpected things your way," he said with a shrug. "What matters is how you choose to respond." His answer left the group inspired, but it also raised new questions. Clearly, Keanu wasn't interested in harboring resentment or seeking revenge, but that didn't mean he intended to ignore the situation entirely. Those who knew him best suspected he was using this experience as fuel for something bigger, something meaningful. After all, Keanu had built his career on portraying characters who fought for justice and stood up for the underdog. Perhaps this real-life incident would inspire him to do the same off-screen. Behind the scenes, however, tensions simmered between Keanu and the dealership. Though he hadn't pursued legal action, whispers circulated about potential negotiations. Some speculated that Keanu might partner with the dealership to implement reforms, turning a negative experience into a positive outcome. Others wondered if he would use his platform to advocate for greater awareness of workplace bullying and discrimination. Whatever path he chose, one thing was certain. Keanu's response would set the tone for how the public viewed both him and the dealership moving forward. As the days turned into weeks, anticipation reached a fever pitch. Fans eagerly awaited any sign of resolution, hoping for closure that aligned with Keanu's reputation for grace and compassion. Meanwhile, Mark wrestled with guilt and regret, realizing too late the magnitude of his mistake. He reached out to Keanu privately, penning a heartfelt letter of apology. In it, he admitted his behavior had been unacceptable and expressed remorse for failing to recognize Keanu's humanity in the heat of the moment. Whether Keanu would forgive him, or even acknowledge the gesture, remained uncertain. And so, the stage was set for a pivotal moment. The world watched and waited, curious to see how this unlikely chapter in Keanu's life would unfold. What started as a simple visit to a motorcycle dealership had evolved into a lesson about judgment, redemption, and the power of forgiveness. Little did anyone know Keanu was already plotting his next move, a decision that would redefine not only his relationship with the dealership, but also his commitment to making the world a better place. The day finally came when Keanu Reeves decided to address the incident publicly. He chose an unconventional setting for his statement, not a press conference or a late-night talk show, but a small community center in Los Angeles where he frequently volunteered. The room was filled with teenagers from underprivileged backgrounds, many of whom looked up to Keanu not just as a celebrity, but as a mentor and role model. Reporters had been tipped off about his appearance and gathered quietly. At the back of the room, their cameras rolling as Keanu took a seat among the kids. For a moment, there was silence. Keanu sat cross-legged on the floor, his posture relaxed yet thoughtful. His expression was calm, almost serene, as if he carried no weight from the events that had unfolded weeks earlier. Then, with a soft smile, he began to speak, not as a Hollywood star, but as a person sharing his thoughts with those who mattered most to him. "I want to start by saying thank you," he said, his voice gentle but steady. "Thank you to all of you here today for letting me share this space with you. And thank you to everyone out there who has shown support during a challenging time." The teenagers exchanged glances, curious about what he meant. One brave girl raised her hand and asked, "Are you talking about the thing with the motorcycle guy?" Keanu chuckled softly, nodding. "Yeah, I am," he admitted. "It's been a pretty crazy few weeks, hasn't it?" He went on to recount the details of the altercation, keeping his tone neutral and free of bitterness. He described how he'd walked into the dealership simply to explore his passion for motorcycles, only to be met with hostility and disrespect. When he mentioned the slap, the room fell silent again. Some of the kids gasped, while others clenched their fists in anger on his behalf. But Keanu quickly reassured them that he wasn't looking for sympathy. "Here's the thing," he continued. "What happened to me isn't really about me, it's about something bigger. It's about how we treat each other as human beings, especially when we don't know someone's story. That day I wasn't seen as a person. I was judged based on assumptions. And unfortunately, that happens more often than we realize." His words resonated deeply with the audience. Many of the teens nodded knowingly. They had faced similar judgments themselves, whether because of their clothes, their accents, or the neighborhoods they came from. Keanu's vulnerability made him relatable and his message struck a chord. But then, he revealed something unexpected. "There's another part of the story that I haven't shared yet," he said, pausing to let the anticipation build. "Before things escalated, I actually tried to hint at who I was, not in a bragging way, just subtly, hoping maybe it would change the tone of the conversation. But instead of calming down, the situation got worse. That's when I realized something important. Sometimes people are so caught up in their own assumptions that they can't see past them." This admission shocked both the kids in the room and the reporters listening intently. For days, the media had portrayed Keanu as a victim of senseless aggression, a narrative that painted Mark, the salesman, as entirely at fault. But now, Keanu was offering a more nuanced perspective. He acknowledged that his subtle hints might have unintentionally provoked Mark further, fueling his frustration rather than diffusing it. "I'm not excusing what happened," Keanu clarified. "No one deserves to be treated like that, regardless of the circumstances. But I do think it's worth reflecting on why things spiraled out of control. Was it pride, miscommunication, fear? Maybe all of the above. What I learned is that misunderstandings happen and they can escalate quickly if we're not careful." As he spoke, Keanu's demeanor shifted slightly. There was a spark of determination in his eyes, a quiet resolve that hinted at what he planned to do next. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, and addressed the group directly. "This experience taught me something valuable," he said. "It reminded me of how easy it is to misjudge someone based on appearances, and it made me realize how important it is to create spaces where people feel seen and heard, no matter who they are or where they come from." With that, Keanu announced his decision to collaborate with anti-bullying organizations and advocacy groups focused on empathy and understanding. He explained that he wanted to use this incident as a teaching moment, not just for himself, but for others as well. Together, he and these organizations would launch a campaign aimed at educating people about the dangers of snap judgments and unchecked emotions. They planned to visit schools, host workshops, and develop resources designed to foster kindness and inclusivity. The announcement drew applause from the teens, who cheered enthusiastically. Even the reporters couldn't help but smile as they scribbled notes and captured footage of the heartfelt moment. Keanu's approach was refreshingly different from the typical celebrity response to controversy. Rather than seeking revenge or playing the victim, he chose to focus on healing and growth, for himself, for the dealership, and for society as a whole. After the session ended, Keanu stayed behind to chat with the kids individually. He listened intently as they shared their own experiences with bullying and prejudice, offering words of encouragement and advice. His presence was warm and genuine, leaving a lasting impression on everyone he spoke to. By the time he left the center, the mood in the room had transformed from curiosity to inspiration. Meanwhile, news of Keanu's remarks spread rapidly online. Fans praised his maturity and wisdom, calling him a true role model. Social media lit up with messages of admiration, with hashtags like #BeLikeKeanu trending alongside posts celebrating his commitment to making a difference. Even critics of the dealership softened their stance, acknowledging that Keanu's response offered a path toward redemption rather than retribution. Back at the dealership, Greg, the owner, watched Keanu's speech with a mix of relief and awe. He had feared that Keanu might seek legal action or demand punitive measures, but instead, he had chosen a route rooted in compassion and education. It was a reminder that even in moments of conflict, there was always room for forgiveness and progress. Inspired by Keanu's example, Greg reached out to him personally, proposing a partnership to revamp the dealership's policies and culture. He envisioned creating a training program centered around customer service, communication, and empathy, using Keanu's story as a case study. To Greg's surprise, Keanu agreed to meet with him to discuss the idea further. Their meeting took place at a quiet cafe near the youth center. Over coffee, Keanu listened as Greg outlined his vision for reform. He appreciated the sincerity behind Greg's efforts and recognized the opportunity to turn a negative situation into a positive legacy. Together, they brainstormed ways to ensure that no customer or employee ever felt dismissed or disrespected again. By the end of their conversation, Keanu extended an olive branch. "Let's make this count," he said simply. "Not for me, but for everyone who walks through your doors. Let's prove that mistakes can lead to meaningful change." Greg nodded gratefully, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. As they parted ways, he knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but with Keanu's guidance, he believed the dealership could emerge stronger and more compassionate than ever before. In the days that followed, Keanu reflected on the journey he'd embarked upon. What started as a simple trip to a motorcycle showroom had evolved into a powerful lesson about humanity, humility, and the importance of seeing beyond surface-level judgments. Though the slap had left a mark, both physically and emotionally, it had also opened doors to new possibilities. And as Keanu prepared for the next phase of his mission, he did so with hope in his heart and a clear sense of direction. Mark sat alone in his small apartment, the weight of his actions pressing down on him like a storm cloud that refused to lift. Since the incident with Keanu Reeves, his life had unraveled at an alarming pace. The dealership had fired him, citing unprofessional conduct, and news outlets painted him as the villain in a story he barely recognized. Friends stopped calling, co-workers avoided him, and strangers online hurled insults that cut deeper than he cared to admit. For the first time in his life, Mark felt truly isolated, but it wasn't just the public backlash that haunted him. It was the memory of Keanu's face in that moment. Mark replayed the scene over and over in his mind, cringing every time he remembered the calmness in Keanu's eyes despite the slap. There had been no anger, no retaliation, just a quiet dignity that made Mark feel smaller with each passing day. He couldn't shake the feeling that he had let his frustration boil over into something ugly, something unforgivable. And now, there was no taking it back. Desperate for redemption, Mark decided to write a letter to Keanu. It wasn't easy. Putting pen to paper forced him to confront emotions he'd rather bury. But he knew he owed it to himself, and to Keanu, to try. He started by apologizing sincerely, acknowledging the pain and embarrassment he had caused. Then he opened up about his own struggles, the pressure he felt at work, the fear of failing to meet sales targets, and the way those insecurities had clouded his judgment. "I never meant to hurt you," Mark wrote. "What I did was wrong, and I'll carry that regret for the rest of my life. You didn't deserve any of it. Please know that I'm deeply sorry." He ended the letter by asking if they could meet in person, not to defend himself but to listen and learn. Folding the note carefully, Mark mailed it with trembling hands, unsure if Keanu would even read it, let alone respond. Days passed without a word, and Mark began to lose hope. Maybe this was his punishment, to live with the consequences of his actions forever without closure or forgiveness. Then, one evening, his phone buzzed with an unknown number. Hesitant but curious, Mark answered. On the other end of the line was Keanu himself, speaking in the same calm, measured tone Mark remembered from their encounter. "Hey, Mark," Keanu said. "I got your letter. Thanks for reaching out." Mark froze, his heart pounding in his chest. "Mr. Reeves, Keanu, I don't even know what to say. I'm so sorry. I can't believe I—" "It's okay," Keanu interrupted gently. "We all make mistakes. What matters is what we do after them. I'd like to meet and talk, if you're willing," Mark stammered, his agreement, barely able to process what was happening. They agreed to meet the following afternoon at a quiet park near the youth center where Keanu volunteered. When the day arrived, Mark showed up early, pacing nervously under the shade of a tree. His stomach churned with anxiety as he rehearsed what he wanted to say, but when Keanu finally appeared, all his prepared words vanished. Keanu approached, with a warm smile, dressed casually in jeans and a t-shirt. He extended his hand, which Mark hesitated to shake before finally accepting it. "Thanks for coming," Keanu said simply, gesturing toward a nearby bench. They sat down together, surrounded by the sounds of birds chirping and children playing in the distance. The atmosphere was peaceful, almost surreal, given the tension between them just weeks earlier. For several minutes, neither man spoke. Mark fidgeted with his hands, struggling to find the right words. Finally, he blurted out, "I messed up. Badly. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I need you to know how sorry I am. I was angry, frustrated, and I took it out on you. That's no excuse, though. I treated you like garbage, and I hate myself for it." Keanu listened patiently, his expression soft and understanding. When Mark finished, Keanu nodded slowly. "It takes courage to admit when you're wrong," he said, "and I appreciate your honesty. Believe me, I've been angry before too. We all have moments where we lose control. What matters is learning from them." Mark looked up, surprised by Keanu's lack of bitterness. "But why are you being so nice to me? After everything I did, you should hate me." Keanu chuckled softly. "Hate doesn't solve anything. It just creates more pain. Look, I won't lie. What happened hurt. But holding on to anger wouldn't change what happened. Instead, I thought about why it happened. Was it really about me, or was it about something else?" Mark sighed heavily, rubbing his temples. "You're right. It wasn't about you, it was about me. My boss was writing me hard about sales numbers, and I was already having a bad day. When you started asking questions, I felt threatened, I guess. Like you were mocking me or wasting my time. I let my pride get in the way and I snapped." Keanu nodded again, his gaze thoughtful. "Pride can be a tricky thing. It blinds us to what's really important. But here's the good news. You recognized your mistake, and you reached out. That's a big step. Not everyone does that." The conversation continued for nearly 2 hours, with Mark opening up about his fears and insecurities while Keanu shared his own experiences with judgment and misunderstanding. At one point, Mark confessed that he often felt inadequate compared to his colleagues, especially those who seemed naturally charismatic and successful. Keanu listened intently, offering reassurance without judgment. "You're not alone in feeling that way," Keanu said. "Everyone has doubts, even people who seem confident on the outside. The key is to focus on growth, not perfection. You can't change the past, but you can decide how you move forward." By the end of their meeting, Mark felt lighter, as if a heavy burden had been lifted off his shoulders. Keanu hadn't absolved him completely, nor had he pretended the slap didn't happen. But he had extended grace and understanding, giving Mark the chance to rebuild his life with purpose and intention. As they stood to part ways, Keanu placed a hand on Mark's shoulder. "Take care of yourself," he said. "And remember, you're capable of more than you think." In the weeks that followed, Mark threw himself into self-improvement. He enrolled in anger management classes, attended therapy sessions, and volunteered at the same youth center where Keanu mentored kids. Slowly but surely, he began to piece his life back together. Along the way, he stayed in touch with Keanu, who welcomed him as a partner in their shared mission to promote empathy and kindness. Together, they visited schools and community centers, sharing their story as a cautionary tale about the dangers of snap judgments and unchecked emotions. Mark spoke candidly about his mistakes, using his experience as a teaching tool to help others avoid similar pitfalls. Audiences responded with overwhelming support, praising both men for their vulnerability and commitment to making a difference. Meanwhile, the motorcycle dealership underwent significant changes under Greg's leadership. Inspired by Keanu's vision, the company implemented new training programs focused on customer service, conflict resolution, and inclusivity. Employees learned to prioritize connection over assumptions, creating a welcoming environment for customers of all backgrounds. Sales improved not because of flashy promotions, but because people felt valued and respected, a testament to the power of empathy in business. As the months passed, Keanu watched with pride as Mark transformed from a symbol of controversy into a beacon of hope. Their unlikely friendship became a source of inspiration for countless individuals, proving that redemption was possible even in the darkest moments. And though the slap would always remain a part of their history, it no longer defined them. Instead, it served as a reminder of the strength found in forgiveness and the beauty of second chances. For Keanu, this journey reinforced his belief in humanity's capacity for growth and change. He had always known that kindness could bridge divides, but seeing it play out firsthand with someone like Mark was a powerful affirmation of his values. As he rode away on a newly customized motorcycle gifted to him by the reformed dealership, Keanu smiled, knowing that sometimes the hardest roads lead to the most rewarding destinations. Months after the incident at the motorcycle dealership, life had transformed in ways no one could have predicted. The once infamous showroom, which had been a symbol of arrogance and poor judgment, now stood as a beacon of change and progress. Under Greg's leadership, the business had undergone a complete overhaul, not just in its policies but in its very soul. Gone were the days of dismissive attitudes and rushed interactions. Instead, the dealership became known for its warmth, inclusivity, and dedication to customer satisfaction. The transformation began with small yet meaningful steps. Employees attended workshops on empathy and active listening, learning how to connect with customers on a personal level. They were encouraged to ask questions not out of obligation, but out of genuine curiosity about what each person wanted from their motorcycle experience. Posters adorned the walls, featuring quotes like "Respect builds trust and every rider has a story." These weren't just slogans. They were principles that guided every interaction within the showroom. One of the most impactful changes was the introduction of a mentorship program. Experienced mechanics and salespeople paired up with newcomers, teaching them not only technical skills but also the importance of patience and understanding. Mark, who had initially been fired, returned to the dealership, not as an employee but as a volunteer advocate for workplace reform. His presence served as a constant reminder of the consequences of unchecked emotions and the power of accountability. Customers often remarked on how his humility and newfound compassion added depth to the dealership's culture. Outside the showroom, Keanu Reeves continued to champion the cause of empathy and kindness. His collaboration with anti-bullying organizations flourished, inspiring countless individuals across the globe. Schools invited him to speak at assemblies, where he shared stories of resilience and encouraged students to stand up against prejudice. Teachers reported seeing positive shifts in behavior among their pupils, many of whom adopted Keanu's mantra, "See the person, not the label." Keanu also worked closely with the dealership to create educational materials designed to prevent similar incidents in the future. Together, they produced videos and pamphlets highlighting the importance of respectful communication, particularly in high-pressure environments. These resources were distributed not only to other dealerships but also to businesses in various industries, sparking a ripple effect of cultural change. But perhaps the most touching aspect of this journey was the bond between Keanu and Mark. What started as an apology evolved into a true friendship built on mutual respect and shared purpose. Mark often accompanied Keanu to community events, where they spoke candidly about their experiences and urged others to embrace forgiveness and growth. Their dynamic was unique. Mark, the former antagonist turned ally, and Keanu, the humble hero who refused to see anyone as irredeemable. Audiences marveled at their chemistry, finding inspiration in their ability to rise above adversity. Their partnership extended beyond public appearances. On weekends, they volunteered together at the youth center, mentoring teens and helping them navigate challenges ranging from peer pressure to self-doubt. One teenager named Alex particularly stood out. He had a passion for motorcycles but lacked confidence in his abilities. Seeing a bit of himself in Alex, Keanu took the boy under his wing, teaching him the basics of riding while Mark showed him how to maintain and repair bikes. By the end of the summer, Alex had built his own custom mini bike, proudly showcasing it during a community fair. The pride in his eyes mirrored the joy Keanu and Mark felt watching him succeed. As word of their efforts spread, media outlets revisited the story, this time focusing on the positive outcomes rather than the initial controversy. Documentaries and interviews highlighted the dealership's transformation, portraying it as a model for businesses seeking to foster healthier workplace cultures. Journalists praised Keanu for his leadership and grace, noting how his actions had sparked a movement far greater than anyone anticipated. For Keanu, the entire experience reinforced his belief in humanity's potential for redemption. He often reflected on how the slap, though painful, had ultimately led to something beautiful. It reminded him that even in moments of conflict, there was always an opportunity to grow, to turn pain into purpose and division into unity. He carried this lesson with him wherever he went, whether on set filming his next blockbuster or spending quiet evenings at home reflecting on life's complexities. Meanwhile, Mark found peace in his new role as an advocate for change. Though he still carried the weight of his past mistakes, he no longer let them define him. Instead, he used them as fuel to help others avoid similar pitfalls. His journey taught him that redemption wasn't about erasing the past. It was about creating a better future, for himself and for those around him. By the end of the year, the motorcycle dealership hosted a grand reopening event to celebrate its rebirth. Hundreds of people attended, including local officials, industry, leaders, and fans of Keanu Reeves. The atmosphere buzzed with excitement as attendees explored the revamped showroom, participated in interactive exhibits, and listened to speeches from Greg, Keanu, and Mark. When it was Keanu's turn to speak, he stepped onto the stage to thunderous applause. "Thank you all for being here today," he began, his voice steady and heartfelt. "This isn't just a celebration of a business. It's a celebration of what we can achieve when we choose kindness over judgment, understanding over assumptions. None of us are perfect, but we're all capable of growth, and sometimes it takes a difficult moment, a mistake, a misunderstanding to remind us of that." He paused, scanning the crowd before continuing. "When I walked into this dealership months ago, I didn't expect any of this to happen. But looking back, I realized that everything unfolded exactly as it needed to. Because of that day, lives have changed. Not just mine, not just Mark's, but yours too. That's the power of perspective. That's the beauty of second chances." His words resonated deeply with everyone present, drawing tears from some and cheers from others. As he concluded his speech, Keanu gestured toward Mark, inviting him to join him on stage. Together, they unveiled a plaque commemorating the dealership's commitment to empathy and inclusion. Engraved on it were the words, "Every journey begins with respect." After the ceremony, Keanu slipped away quietly, eager to return to his private life. But before leaving, he stopped by the chopper that had first caught his eye during his initial visit. Running his hand along its polished frame, he smiled softly, remembering the twists and turns that had brought him here. Then, mounting his newly customized motorcycle, a gift from the dealership, he revved the engine and sped off into the sunset. As he rode, the wind rushing past him and the road stretching endlessly ahead, Keanu felt a profound sense of fulfillment. This chapter of his life had been unexpected, challenging, and ultimately transformative. It had shown him that even the roughest roads could lead to destinations worth reaching, and that sometimes the greatest adventures weren't found in movies or scripts, but in the everyday moments that tested our character and revealed our true selves. And so, with the hum of his bike beneath him and the lessons of the past guiding him, Keanu Reeves disappeared into the horizon, ready to embrace whatever lay ahead with the same humility, courage, and unwavering belief in the goodness of people that had always defined him.